We'd known each other for so long that I couldn't remember a time when she wasn't there. She was a part of my life the way the sun is a part of the morning. It just happened, every day, without question. We'd grown up on the same street, gone to the same schools, even ended up at the same university. Our lives had been a series of overlapping circles, one blending into the other until the lines disappeared entirely. Somewhere along the way, she became more than just someone I knew. She became my person, my constant. We shared everything, secrets that no one else knew, dreams that we whispered in the quiet hours of the night, fears we didn't dare tell the rest of the world. She was my late night call, the first person I texted when something good happened, and the one I ran to when it all fell apart. We had our rituals. Every Friday night, we'd grab takeout from the little Thai place 2 blocks away and watch the worst movies we could find, making fun of the plot until we laughed so hard our sides hurt. On Sunday mornings, we'd meet at the park with coffee, sit on our favorite bench, and talk about nothing and everything. She was my partner in crime, the one who'd distract the teacher so I could sneak a snack in class, the one who'd help me come up with excuses when I didn't want to go to some boring family dinner, the one who'd stand in line with me for hours just because I needed to try the newest dessert craze. Love? That wasn't supposed to be part of the equation. People always asked, sometimes teasing, sometimes genuinely curious if we were together. We'd laugh it off. No, we'd say in unison, like it was the most ridiculous thing in the world. We didn't need romance to make what we had special. At least, that's what I thought. She dated other people. So did I. Sometimes we'd talk about it, share stories, vent about bad dates, laugh about the awkward moments. She'd give me advice, telling me when I was being stubborn or unrealistic. I'd do the same for her. But through it all, nothing changed between us. Not really. We were still us. I think that's why I never questioned it. I never stopped to wonder if there could be something more. Why would I? We had the kind of friendship people envied, the kind where you didn't have to explain yourself because the other person already knew. I knew how she took her coffee without asking. I knew which songs she played when she was sad and which ones meant she was in a good mood. I knew she couldn't sleep with the closet door open, that she hated the sound of ticking clocks, and that she always cried at the end of her favorite movie no matter how many times she'd seen it, and she knew me just as well. It was safe, comfortable, familiar. The idea of anything more seemed unnecessary, maybe even dangerous, because if we tried and it didn't work, what would happen to everything we'd built? So I didn't think about it. I didn't let myself at least not yet, because the truth was, love has a way of sneaking in quietly. It doesn't always announce itself with fireworks and grand gestures. Sometimes, it hides in the small things, in the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention, or the way my day felt incomplete if I didn't hear her voice. But back then, in those days, I told myself we were just friends, and I believed it, or at least, I tried to. It didn't happen all at once. There was no single dramatic moment where everything shifted. Instead, it started with the smallest things, so small, I didn't even realize at first that anything was changing. The way she laughed at my jokes, for instance. I'd heard it 1,000 times before, that soft, genuine laugh that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. But lately, it felt different, warmer, like hearing a favorite song after forgetting how much you loved it. Then there was the way her hair fell over her face when she read. I'd seen it countless times during study sessions, lazy afternoons, or while she sat beside me in the park, completely absorbed in a novel. But now, I found myself wanting to brush it back, just to see her face fully. I never did, of course. That wasn't something we did, not yet. And her eyes, God, her eyes. I'd always known they lit up when she was excited. Usually when she was talking about something she loved, books, travel, the perfect cup of coffee. But lately, I found myself watching for that spark, almost waiting for it. And when it happened, it was like the room got a little brighter. I kept telling myself I was imagining it, that I'd always noticed these things. I was just more aware of them now. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the whole truth. Something inside me was shifting, and I didn't know how to stop it or if I even wanted to. It was in the little moments too. Like when we were watching a movie and she leaned against me, not in a way that was unusual for us, but suddenly, I was hyper aware of the warmth of her shoulder against mine. Or when she texted me late at night just to tell me some random thought, and I found myself smiling at my phone like an idiot. We were still the same us we'd always been, but there was an undercurrent now, something unspoken humming beneath our conversations. I started catching myself looking at her longer than I should, my eyes tracing the curve of her smile or the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. And then there was the night. We stayed up talking until nearly a.m. We'd been sitting on my couch, both of us wrapped in blankets, sharing stories from when we were kids. At one point, she laughed so hard she couldn't catch her breath, and I swear I felt something in my chest twist, not in pain, but in that way where you suddenly realize you're in trouble. Because I was starting to see her differently, I didn't tell her. How could I? We'd built years of trust, of knowing exactly who we were to each other. I was terrified of ruining it, of crossing a line we could never uncross. So I kept quiet, burying the thoughts as deep as I could. But it wasn't just me. Sometimes I thought I caught her looking at me in that same quiet, searching way. Her gaze would linger for just a second too long, or her smile would soften like there was something she wasn't saying. Maybe I was imagining that too. Or maybe she was starting to notice the little changes as well. Whatever it was, I knew one thing for certain. The friendship I had always counted on was beginning to feel like something more, and that both terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. It didn't happen all at once. There was no single dramatic moment where everything shifted. Instead, it started with the smallest things, so small I didn't even realize at first that anything was changing. The way she laughed at my jokes, for instance. I'd heard it 1,000 times before, that soft, genuine laugh that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. But lately, it felt different, warmer, like hearing a favorite song after forgetting how much you loved it. Then there was the way her hair fell over her face when she read. I'd seen it countless times during study sessions, lazy afternoons, or while she sat beside me in the park, completely absorbed in a novel. But now, I found myself wanting to brush it back, just to see her face fully. I never did, of course. That wasn't something we did, not yet. And her eyes, God, her eyes. I'd always known they lit up when she was excited. Usually when she was talking about something she loved: books, travel, the perfect cup of coffee. But lately, I found myself watching for that spark, almost waiting for it. And when it happened, it was like the room got a little brighter. I kept telling myself I was imagining it, that I'd always noticed these things. I was just more aware of them now. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the whole truth. Something inside me was shifting, and I didn't know how to stop it or if I even wanted to. It was in the little moments too. Like when we were watching a movie and she leaned against me, not in a way that was unusual for us, but suddenly, I was hyper aware of the warmth of her shoulder against mine. Or when she texted me late at night just to tell me some random thought, and I found myself smiling at my phone like an idiot. We were still the same us we'd always been, but there was an undercurrent now, something unspoken humming beneath our conversations. I started catching myself looking at her longer than I should, my eyes tracing the curve of her smile or the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. And then there was the night. We stayed up talking until nearly a.m. We'd been sitting on my couch, both of us wrapped in blankets, sharing stories from when we were kids. At one point, she laughed so hard she couldn't catch her breath, and I swear I felt something in my chest twist, not in pain, but in that way where you suddenly realize you're in trouble. Because I was starting to see her differently, I didn't tell her. How could I? We'd built years of trust, of knowing exactly who we were to each other. I was terrified of ruining it, of crossing a line we could never uncross. So I kept quiet, burying the thoughts as deep as I could. But it wasn't just me. Sometimes I thought I caught her looking at me in that same quiet, searching way. Her gaze would linger for just a second too long, or her smile would soften like there was something she wasn't saying. Maybe I was imagining that too. Or maybe she was starting to notice the little changes as well. Whatever it was, I knew one thing for certain. The friendship I had always counted on was beginning to feel like something more, and that both terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. The rain had been falling since late afternoon, turning the streets into a mirror of blurred lights and rippling puddles. By the time evening settled in, the sound of it had become a constant backdrop, a steady, rhythmic tapping against the windows. We'd decided not to go out, opting instead for an easy night in just the two of us, a stack of movies, and enough snacks to last until morning. It was the kind of evening we'd had countless times before. She showed up at my apartment with Her hair damp from the rain, a hoodie that looked 2 sizes too big, and a mischievous grin that told me she'd brought something better than the usual popcorn. Sure enough, she pulled out a box of her favorite chocolate-covered biscuits like it was a prize worth celebrating. We settled onto the couch, the soft glow of the lamp casting a warm circle of light over us. The rain outside created a gentle hum, blending with the sound of the movie playing on the TV. I don't even remember what we chose, some lighthearted comedy, I think, but my attention wasn't really on the screen. It was on her. She sat close, our knees brushing now and then, her laughter filling the room in bursts. I tried to focus on the movie, but every time she leaned toward me to whisper a comment, I caught myself watching the way her lips moved, or how her eyes seemed to sparkle even in the dim light. Halfway through the second movie, she shifted, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. Then, without a word, she rested her head on my shoulder. It wasn't the first time we'd been this close. We'd leaned on each other before on bus rides, during long flights, in crowded places where standing side by side meant bumping shoulders. But this felt different. Her hair brushed against my neck, soft and faintly scented with the vanilla shampoo she always used. Her breathing began to slow, steady, and calm, and every inhale seemed to echo inside my chest. I didn't move. I barely breathed. My heart was racing in a way I couldn't control, but the rest of me was still, like I was afraid that even the smallest shift would break the spell. I could feel the warmth of her through the blanket, the rise and fall of her breath sinking with mine until I didn't know which belonged to who. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the sound of rain and the faint flicker of the TV screen, it hit me with a clarity I couldn't ignore. I wasn't just her best friend anymore. I was someone who had fallen for her. It wasn't sudden. It had been building piece by piece over years of shared jokes, whispered secrets, and moments like this that seemed small at the time, but had carved themselves deep into me. But this, her sleeping on my shoulder, trusting me with this unguarded version of herself, was the moment I could no longer pretend. I looked down at her, at the way her hair fell across her face, at the faint crease in her brow that smoothed when I gently adjusted the blanket around her. She didn't stir, just breathed softly, her hand resting loosely against my arm. The movie played on, but I didn't hear a word of it. My mind was full of her. I didn't say anything that night. I didn't dare, but I knew something had shifted forever. And no matter how much I told myself to be careful, I also knew there was no going back. After that night, the night she fell asleep on my shoulder, something inside me wouldn't settle. Every time I saw her, the memory would rush back, her warmth against me, the slow rhythm of her breathing, the way I'd realized with startling clarity that I was in love with her. And that terrified me. So I did what I thought would protect both of us. I started pulling away, not in an obvious, cruel way. I still answered her texts, still showed up when we'd made plans. But I stopped lingering after our conversations, stopped initiating our late-night calls. When we walked together, I kept a little more space between us. I told myself it was for the best, that if I could just create some distance, maybe these feelings would fade back into something manageable. But she noticed. Of course she did. One afternoon, we were sitting at our usual spot in the park, coffee cups in hand. It was one of those crisp, sunny days where the air felt almost too clear, as if there was nowhere to hide. She was talking about a book she'd just finished, but then she stopped mid-sentence, studying me with a look that made me want to squirm. "You've been acting different," she said. I forced a laugh, hoping it sounded casual. "Different? How?" She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I don't know. You just feel far away lately." Her words landed heavier than I expected. I wanted to tell her the truth, that she wasn't just my best friend anymore. That every time I was near her, my chest ached with the weight of not saying what I really felt. That every moment without her now felt wrong, incomplete, like I was missing a part of myself. But the words stayed locked inside. Instead, I shrugged and took a sip of coffee. "Just tired, I guess. Work's been a lot." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push it. Still, I could feel her gaze on me for the rest of the afternoon, like she was trying to read the spaces between my words. The truth was, creating distance wasn't making my feelings fade, it was making them sharper. Every time I kept my hands in my pockets instead of letting them brush against hers, I felt the absence like a dull ache. Every time I told her I couldn't hang out and then sat at home doing nothing, I missed her so much it was almost physical, and she was everywhere. In the song that played on the radio that reminded me of our road trips, In the corner of the cafe where we'd spent hours talking about nothing. In the way I caught myself turning to share a thought before remembering I wasn't supposed to be so quick to reach for her anymore. The distance was supposed to protect me. Instead, it made me realize just how much of my life had her in it. How much I didn't want to lose that, even if it meant risking everything. That day in the park, as we finished our coffees, she glanced at me again with that searching look. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" she said softly. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, I know." But I didn't tell her not then. I just walked her home, keeping my steps even, my hands in my pockets, and my heart firmly locked behind my ribs. And yet, with every block we walked, I knew I couldn't keep this up forever. The night was quiet in a way that felt rare for the city. The air was cool, just enough to make me wish I'd worn an extra layer, and the only sounds were the distant hum of cars and the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. We were walking, side by side, our steps in sync, the glow of the streetlights spilling warm pools of light along the sidewalk. It had been weeks since I started pulling away, and even though I'd tried to keep my distance, the tension between us had only grown. Every glance, every pause in our conversation seemed to be filled with something unspoken. That night, it felt heavier than ever, like if I didn't say what I'd been holding back, I might never get the chance again. We were almost at her street when I stopped walking. She noticed right away, turning to face me with a curious look. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft in the stillness. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I didn't have a plan for this moment, no perfect words, no clever lead-in, just a truth that had been pressing against my chest for too long. My voice faltered, and I had to take a breath. "I think I'm in love with you." The words came out barely above a whisper, but in the silence, they felt loud, too loud. My hands were cold, my stomach twisting as the seconds stretched between us. She didn't say anything right away, and in that pause, every fear I'd ever had came rushing in. What if she didn't feel the same? What if I'd just ruined everything? But then she smiled. It wasn't the polite smile she gave strangers, or the amused grin she wore when I said something dumb. This was different, soft, warm, and full of something that made my chest ache in the best way. "Good," she said simply. I blinked, not sure I'd heard her right. "Good?" she nodded, taking a small step closer. "Because I've been waiting for you to say that." For a moment, I just stared at her, trying to process what she'd just said. All the nights I'd spent wondering, all the times I'd convinced myself she couldn't possibly feel the same, it had all been for nothing. She'd been here waiting, this whole time. I felt something inside me loosen, like a knot that had been pulled tight for years suddenly letting go. I laughed softly, the tension in my body melting away. "You could have said something, you know," I teased, my voice lighter now. She shrugged, her smile turning just a little mischievous. "I wanted to see how long it would take you." I shook my head, but I couldn't stop smiling. The weight I'd been carrying had vanished, replaced by a warmth that spread through every part of me. Without thinking, I reached for her hand. She didn't hesitate, her fingers sliding into mine like they'd been meant to be there all along. We stood there for a moment under the glow of the streetlight, the world around us fading until it felt like there was nothing else, just the two of us, holding on to something we both knew we'd never want to let go. As we started walking again, her thumb brushed lightly against my hand, and for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I didn't feel afraid anymore, because she wasn't just my best friend. She was the person I loved, and she loved me too. From the moment she smiled at me under that streetlight and said she'd been waiting for me to confess, everything shifted. It wasn't dramatic or overwhelming, it was subtle, like the way the air feels after rain, fresh and full of promise. We were still best friends. We still texted each other ridiculous memes at a.m., still had our Friday night takeout and bad movie marathons, still finished each other's sentences without thinking. But now there was something more threaded through it all, something deeper, stronger. Her hand found mine more often now. Sometimes it happened without thought, walking down the street, sitting side by side on the couch, waiting in line at the coffee shop. Other times, it was deliberate, her fingers curling into mine in moments when words would have been too small to hold what she was feeling. Our laughter felt different too. It had always been easy, but now it carried an added warmth, like we were both in on a secret the rest of the world didn't know. When she looked at me, there was a softness in her eyes that made me feel like I'd come home, no matter where we were. And yet, for all that had changed, the core of us stayed the same. We still teased each other relentlessly. She still rolled her eyes at my too sweet coffee order, and I still complained when she made me listen to her endless playlists of slow, moody songs. But now, the teasing came with the casual brush of her knee against mine, or the way she'd lean in just a little closer when she laughed. Falling for her had never been part of the plan. In fact, I'd spent years making sure it wasn't building walls around the idea, convincing myself it was safer to keep her as my best friend. But now, I couldn't imagine it any other way. We talked about it sometimes, late at night when the world felt quiet enough for honesty. She told me she'd known for a while, long before I'd admitted it to myself. "You're not as subtle as you think," she'd teased once, her head resting against my shoulder. I'd laughed, but there was truth in it. Looking back, I could see all the signs I'd ignored, the way my day felt wrong if I didn't hear from her, the way I'd memorized little details about her without even trying, the way I'd started measuring time by the moments we spent together. Now, I didn't have to hide it. I could tell her she looked beautiful without feeling like I'd crossed a line. I could pull her close when it rained and know she'd lean into me without hesitation. We'd become more than best friends, but the friendship hadn't gone anywhere. If anything, it had become the foundation we stood on, steady and unshakable. Loving her wasn't a risk that had cost me what we had, it had deepened it, rooted it in something unbreakable. Sometimes, when we were walking together, she'd squeeze my hand and glance at me with that knowing smile. In those moments, I'd think about all the times I'd almost told her, all the nights I'd kept my feelings locked away. And I'd realize that maybe all that waiting had been worth it, because it had led us here, to a place where I didn't have to wonder anymore. Falling for her was never the plan. But plans change, and us felt less like a change and more like the thing my life had been quietly moving toward all along. And now that I was here, I knew I'd never want to go back.